mass suicides adhere to the Mayan calendar, which predicts the end of time to occur on the 21st of December of this year. This year.
The bulk of the work picks up basically about half the way through the Escape from LA sequence. We actually pick up with a nice shot flying over the golf course that's at the base of the Santa Monica Airport, in which you see a nice big crack open up in several houses and trees and whatnot fall in. And then basically it picks up at the airport, and from there that leads into the actual collapse of the runway and the enormous fissure that opens up and kind of the flight through that. And then they emerge, of course, into downtown and fly through. It eventually ends up with the last two shots seeing California more or less sliding off into the ocean. And that chunk defines the majority of what we did. We did do a little bit with Washington, D.C. with some ash shots, and I think we did the Washington Monument collapsing, but the vast majority of everything was in the latter half of the Los Angeles sequence.
California is going down!
God, you sound like a crazy person. The governor just said we're fine now.
The guy's an actor. He's reading a script.
Well, mostly data load. You're talking about a tremendous number of buildings and structures, large-scale landscapes and whatnot that were crumbling. So most of this was an exercise in trying to apply, the rigid body type techniques and various things to just very, very large-scale scenes, large numbers of buildings, a lot of complexity in the buildings or other structures, and then having that tied in with a vast array of volumetric effects also that had to cover these very large areas. So it was lots of kind of planning and logistics in terms of trying to put together so many things that had to be simmed in so many different layers, and then of course as your later layers had to depend on the previous ones, there's just that whole thing of trying to organize that and keep it straight. So it was a lot of work. So.
Hey, do you mind if I join you? I wanted to ask you something.
Yeah, I only got a minute.
Hey,
Pickle?
No.
We had a lot of extensive previs was done on the show that we received, and at that point you had all the choreography they had actually planned out for what building tips into what building or various things. And so the first part of it would just be going through and trying to do blocking on our side to make sure that we had gotten the director's vision for the action that was going on in the scene. Whatever the largest structure or objects were that you were having to break up, those would have to go through the demolition pipeline, which the buildings themselves were all, most of them were picked out of real buildings in downtown. Others were things that had been modified or changed a bit, but you'd have to have the buildings built to spec so that it would work with the destruction chopping gizmo that would actually break the thing up into its small pieces. It would then go through kind of an effects rigging process to have all the joint strengths and constraints that glues the building back together so that it essentially remains a cohesive whole. Then you'd have to then apply whatever previous animation had been done. That would have to be applied, so if a building is actually falling over, that's initially actually supplied by animation that we're doing, but then selectively the parts of the building are released and turned dynamic, and then those things actually crumble and look pretty. And really at that point, then it's really just getting those performances bought off on and getting those looking nice, and then if other simulations around them, whether it's like small debris and glass or the dust and volumetrics, all of those would be started on those buildings, or if that building crashed into another one, then in a lot of cases you would then sim that second building after the fact, using the first one as a collision body. And then again, like I say, you just kind of keep stacking these things and working downstream till you actually built up all the layers that were necessary. No, a bullet is actually a good part of the pipe, but essentially this is, I think, becoming more common, is taking the kind of the game engine physics and being able to actually bring that into one of the large packages. In this case it was Houdini, but we essentially wrapped up Bullet into a plug-in in Houdini and then built a pipeline around that, and that eventually ends up being everything from a lot of the things that actually chop up the geometry and then glue them back together, the joints and constraints. All of that is then set up to work with basically how Bullet conceptualizes dynamics and joins and constraints between objects. And so you basically end up with a series of plugins or networks that support the the basic bullet engine at that point. But that was bullet was a big part of our process.
In the beginning, there was a phase probably for like 3 months when we were unsure if we could even do this side of destruction, and then that's why we went down to using the bullet route. But even when we were developing that, obviously we were doing a lot of development tests, the simulation tests, and it really took us like 3 months to even tell ourselves that, oh, maybe we can do this project with the route we took. So yeah, there was definitely a phase where we were really scared whether we can even pull this off or not. There's usually one test that we run, which I think we happened around the third month, where it was a small building test that kind of fell over, and it looked really realistic when it fell down, and it hit the ground and it kind of squashed in half. Those are the moments where we said, oh, wait a minute, maybe we can do this project after all. I think it's the complexity of the destruction, and we have achieved that by considering the physical building structure within the model we were building. So we ran a lot of tests to try and collapse this bungalow model. And to get that to look realistic, we first start with just chop the building up and let it collapse. And that looks kind of okay, but it doesn't look that realistic. And then, so what we ended up doing was that we actually made all the pillars within that structure pretty close to what the physical architecture would do. So we had these pillars running vertically on the walls, and we had the roof supporting pillars, and these were all modeled precisely to what the real thing would do. And it would even set constraints on the wall to be a little bit stronger, or the supporting structure to be stronger. And then you run a simulation, and the roof would collapse fast because it's built that way, and the strength is weaker. So then you see some parts of the house go first, but you can tell that the support structure is still like trying to hold on to it. So that kind of a detail in how we modeled it, how we constrained it, and how we rigged the dynamics really added to the complexity of the simulation.